Good morning and welcome to the NBA Daily for November 21st, 2024. Coming up, the Sixers lose another game, this time with their big three on the court. We've got Sam Amick to talk about the behind-the-scenes stuff with the Sixers and the fallout there, and then possible Brooklyn Nets trade. We've got listener mailbag questions. We've got Isaiah Hartenstein back. Big show. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, S. Another night has passed in the NBA. And look, I said we weren't necessarily going to panic about the Sixers yet, but man, I think we're panicking.
Might be time. Yeah.
Tyrese Maxey made his return to the starting lineup, to the team. We had the full big three out there, and it was a disappointment. They drop a game to the Grizzlies that they definitely should have won, S.
Without Ja Morant.
No Ja Morant out there for the Grizzlies who have been banged up. Even the guys who were on the court for the Grizzlies, Desmond Bane just got back out there. You know, it's a bad loss for the Sixers.
It's not even bad. It's terrible. It's a terrible loss for the Sixers. The
They're
other
2
part
and 12,
of this,
by the way.
Right. And they're still 3 games back of a playoff spot because the East, which is funny about this whole thing. But look, it's terrible for multiple reasons. One, the offense that we talked about last time on the podcast and it being just a disaster continues to be a disaster. And that was with Joel Embiid having a quote unquote bounce back game, right? He performed. The box score says that he played better. The numbers were there. He got to the free throw line more often, but still doesn't seem like that effective MVP type of player, right?
He was in midseason form, though, getting to the free throw line, including shoving Jaren Jackson to the ground and intentionally tripping himself over him at one point. I mean, so the grift skills look like he's in midseason form, but he looks out of shape. I mean, obviously, which we all expect. So he's ineffective, but as like the offense, they weren't really running anything. It didn't seem like there was some sort of plan to put these guys in a position to succeed. And I know they haven't played together. And we're going to talk about the chemistry all year long because it seems like they're going to struggle to be in the lineup together.
Well, especially with Paul George.
Paul George had to leave the game. He hyperextended that same left knee that he already had an issue with. Although Nick Nurse said after the game, but we don't know how much we can even believe anything coming out of anyone's mouth there right now. Nick Nurse says after the game that they thought about putting him back in, but decided not to. Again, take that with a grain of salt because I just don't know if anybody knows what's going on. But offensively, they ran nothing.
Yeah. I mean, look, the Sixers in general over the last few years have been a very isolation heavy team, right? It's natural when you have a player like Joel Embiid to run through ISOs because he's such a hard player to stop in isolation settings. But at the same time, you hope to weaponize some of the off-ball shooting of a Tyrese Maxey, of a Paul George, even Jared McCain, who continues to be electric for this team. You hope that they can weaponize that with some off-ball movement. They haven't. It's just everybody stand around, watch Joel Embiid, try to draw help, and then try to knock down your shots. It creates an environment where it's like, what are we even trying to accomplish on the offensive end? Are we trying to get Joel Embiid his numbers, or are we actually trying to win basketball games?
And that is really the question, isn't it? Because, like, again, you're going to have a bunch of people walking around saying, well, Joel, he had 35 points. He was +7.
Yeah.
And he had 14 free throws. Let's not forget that part, by the way.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of times where he was throwing up some garbage. Like, he looks like he doesn't have his legs.
Sure.
And that's
on
fine.
Everything.
And I'm trying not to judge him based on how he looks because it's clear they're trying to make him play his way into shape. Yeah. As much as I disagree with that, I just think you've got to play your best players. I don't know if he's going to be one of them, especially on the defensive end some of the time. But at this point, Paul George only plays 17 minutes in this game. Tyrese Maxey he's in there for 20. And look, he started out the game. I thought his energy was good. He looked okay physically, but he had a rough game, especially down the stretch.
It's funny you say this. I completely agree with you, but it's funny you say this. And it's funny that their opponents are the Grizzlies because what are the Grizzlies so good at, right? Guys are injured. Guys are hurt. Taylor Jenkins is going to coach up his players. They're so good at finding those diamonds in the rough, the Santi Aldamas, the Scottie Pippen Juniors, the Jay Huffs of the world. Like, they're so good at uplifting their players and also adhering to the styles of those players, right? it's square peg, round hole situation with the Sixers and their offense and the way that stylistically some of their players like to play. And that's why when you see McCain thrive, you're like, okay, this is a guy who clearly can thrive in any setting, which is why he's such a talented player. But it's just interesting that this happened against the Grizzlies that are sort of the antithesis of what the Sixers are in terms of we'll figure out whatever happens.
The next man up sort of situation. Again, the other thing about Embiid in this game, when he was not involved offensively, like if he set a screen and didn't get a pass, shoulders slump, and he's deactivated himself from the play.
Yeah, and the defense, man. And the defense is non-existent. I mean, he just was being out-efforted sometimes on rebounds by Jaren Jackson Jr. Jaren Jackson Jr. ripped an offensive rebound from Joel Embiid. I mean, that to me, again, it's a combination of physical, but also like, where is your level of compete right now? Yeah. Where is the pride? Well, especially knowing the record, right? Like knowing the stakes, knowing the attention, knowing everybody is looking at you guys to turn this thing around. It's just, you're right. Where's the compete? Yeah. Where's the fight? I mean,
and we could go all day about the Sixers team because they're fascinating. We're probably going to be talking about them all next week, I'm sure. Yep. We got Sam Amick after the break, so stick around for that. But we got to talk about another big comeback. Isaiah Hartenstein came back for the Oklahoma City Thunder. They didn't. I wouldn't even say they needed him, but definitely he makes their life easier. And we saw that immediately in this game. Everyone was able to kind of slide into their more natural role, especially defensively. He was there to erase mistakes, and I thought his rebounding was excellent tonight.
Yeah, the rebounding was a huge part of what the Thunder needed. I mean, it's why they signed him in the first place, right? Yeah. It was a franchise record in a debut for rebounds, which is just a crazy hello and welcome, like that's an incredible way to do it. But yeah, you're right. Everything just made sense for OKC tonight. And admittedly, they played against Portland, but I've been saying Portland is a really frisky team. And like they play very well against some of these playoff teams. Hartenstein in general just sort of makes things easier for this Thunder team. Admittedly, I will say, and I've said admittedly twice now, I'll stop saying it.
Well, you're admitting things. It's okay.
I am admitting things, yeah. OKC, the one guy that I think it'll help the most is Jalen Williams. Yeah. Especially because he's been playing center for them. On offense, Hartenstein's screening ability, his sealing ability is going to open up driving lanes for him to finish in and around the basket. Mm-hmm. He's been playing great, but now you get him into a role that makes more sense for him. And it's just exciting to see how this develops. Yeah. OKC's offense has struggled recently. I think it will start to bounce back once they figure out Hartenstein.
I mean, look, my thing with early on when the Knicks offense was struggling a little bit, I felt like they missed what Hartenstein brought to the equation, especially operating out of the elbow area. And man, like he and Jalen Williams are just they're going to eat coming off DHOs. I mean, Jalen had 30 last night, and OKC, I think Jalen Williams might be the guy that people are going to start waking up to. Yeah. I was listening to Down to Dunk the other day. Shout out to Andrew Schlecht. And he said Jalen Williams would be the best player on a few teams that have some highly touted prospects. And I actually think he's correct.
Yeah, he's not wrong about that. Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, throw him on the Brooklyn Nets, throw him on the maybe, throw him
on the Pistons. I mean,
yeah,
see, maybe, no pushback there.
Damn, I should have pushed back.
That's what I'm talking about. Coming up after the break, we got Sam Amick with more from that locker room meeting with the Philadelphia 76ers. We love a good crisis around here. We're never going to let them go to waste. I mean, we are going to just hammer them home when we get them. And there's no bigger crisis in the NBA than the one happening in Philadelphia. So we had to get our man, Sam Amick, senior national NBA writer. He's the guy who's got all the behind the scenes info. Sam, welcome back to the show. We want to jump right in here because this is, there is so much smoke coming out of there right now. The building's on fire.
It's
clearly.
Fire at this point.
The building is on fire. We can see the smoke from miles away. We know all the story now at this point. They had the players and coach meeting post-game. It took forever for them to have this time. Tyrese Maxey calls out Joel Embiid on being late. Numerous other things, maybe. Tyrese Maxey showing his leadership of the team there. But this is 13 games into the season that we're already having like a team meeting. Joel has not looked great in the very few games that he's played. It's a giant mess, Sam. What do you make of it from being able to read the tea leaves, see a little bit on the inside, and then obviously all the stuff on the outside.
Yeah, guys, it is a mess. I would say, man, if I was advising the Sixers as an unpaid consultant, I would say if you just would have done your media responsibilities after the game first and then had the team meeting, then none of this probably gets out. Because, when you don't talk to the media for an hour after the game, which is what happened, there are rules in place that kind of raises alarm bells, and all the reporters on hand scurry around and try to figure out what's going on.
All the reporters at home. We're talking about, it's been an hour? What's going on there? So,
well, and that's the thing. Is like you see the tweet. I saw it from Gina Mizell. Shout out to her new Blue Sky account, Philly Inquirer. Like she put that out there. And then, you start making phone calls and trying to figure it out. So interesting times indeed. Tyrese Maxey decides to take the microphone, so to speak, with the team and tell the big fella that he's just not, being the leader that he needs to be. And you're talking about timeliness and professionalism and just the way that you move off the court. So that is such an interesting choice for me to see Tyrese make, because he's 5 years in, he's 24 years old. To me, it's him sending a pretty, direct message that it's time for somebody to lead this group. And I applaud him for it. And the best thing, and to his credit, is that Tyrese and Joel, by all accounts, are very tight and remain very tight. And that Joel, is looking in the mirror to an extent here. And that, he gives Tyrese that kind of, that kind of, space to have that voice, because they had mutual respect. But 2-11 is just wild. I don't know how else to say it. I can't believe that they've lost this many games. I know the East is not as good as we thought it was going to be. Maybe they can catch up here a little bit, but tough times.
3 games back of 6. 3 games back.
Luckily it's the East, right?
No, it's interesting you talk about the Maxey and Embiid relationship, because clearly they're on good terms, but it also, in the article that you wrote, it was Embiid voicing a bit of a frustration about what he had to do on the offensive end. What part of that is just him getting his feet wet and getting back into rhythm versus maybe something structurally with what's going on offensively?
I don't have a great sense of what his frustrations are schematically. The only thought I had there is that if you go back to last year when Nick Nurse was new on the job, Nick wasted very little time making it clear that he was going to try to push Joel to be at his best. So you remember the little subplot about how the Sixers decided to go have training camp all the way in Fort Collins, Colorado, which by all accounts, and I was actually there was like a little passive aggressiveness there where it was like, oh, by the way, Mr. Jokic, the guy who is a champion and keeps winning that MVP award over you, is right down the road. And the guy that at the time people, kind of felt like Joel was ducking. So Nick has shown this, willingness to even get, kind of needle his guy a little bit to get him to that next level. So, I think there's a natural friction at times between them. And even friction is probably the wrong word, but a tension. Beyond that, I just think that the physical stuff remains very confusing to me. I was in France watching Joel, obviously had, some games where he didn't look great, finished very strong, but talking to Team USA people, the more important thing is he didn't miss a practice. He didn't miss a shoot around. He didn't miss a game. If he didn't play, it was because Steve Kerr chose for him not to play. So to go from that to left knee injury management being such a massive story this season, it feels like he had some kind of a setback in between there. And because he just obviously doesn't look like himself.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I would say this, it rings a little hollow for me when I hear Joel talking about being used improperly. I mean, he is as heliocentric as you can get without being, a 10 assists a game guy. And he was on a run before he got hurt last year with Nick Nurse and that offense that they were running. And he was on another MVP pace. So he has been used totally fine by Nick Nurse. And I think that to be fair to him, he looks awful physically. And I imagine he probably feels pretty defensive. But, the things that Tyrese Maxey is bringing up, I mean, I don't want to be the guy who talks about leadership, but frankly, it's a little bit disappointing that Embiid with his status in the league, he's an MVP, he is the franchise, he's the process.
How long he's been in the league too, right?
Why isn't he at this point in his career, expected to lead by example to a certain degree. You don't hear about Kevin Durant, being a big rah-rah leader, but he shows up on time and he's in every practice and he's at many games as he can, even fighting through, his advanced age and injury history. So I just think that the standards have been lower for Embiid for years now. And finally, like, this is where, and it stinks that he's in Philly because it's going to get dark fast if he's not out there playing, with the fans. But I do think that it is nice to see that there are people within the organization trying to hold him to account before it gets too late. Because frankly, they had a really loud summer to come out and lay this dud, to start the year. And I start thinking to myself, okay, in your piece, you guys laid it out. Daryl Morey, Nick Nurse, they're safe for now. And we always say for now. But at what point are they not? And then at what point do you just start to look outside? Like, do we need to pivot? There's a lot of people who are very into Jared McCain and what he's done, and they see this as an opportunity for the franchise to just take a different direction. I don't even know what that looks like. No one spelled it out in a way that makes any sense to me. But, something is going to have to change at some point. They either have to be better with what they've got, or they're going to have to improve outside, or people are going to go.
No, that's all on point, Dave. And I feel like, to add to it, this is one of those stories for me that once it comes out, I feel like within the past 24 hours in my circles and just media, it's almost like we're kind of taking some blunt of criticism from people around the league who are, I'll just being totally honest with you, who are saying, man, you guys have been going easy on him for years. Like, this has been happening for years. It's kind of an open secret that, some of these frustrations were there. And if you look at Philly and the question of could the coach or the GM be in trouble, I would probably contextualize it and say, if you go back, I forget the exact number, but, Joel has had a number of GMs, a number of coaches during his tenure. I think ownership wise, some of the conversation at that level has got to be, highlighting that backdrop and realizing that at some point it has to fall at his feet and just keep working on fixing that instead of thinking that you can just make a change elsewhere to try to solve it.
In terms of changes, obviously external also kind of means trades. And I think at some point you get to the point where you consider those trades, not just, the bigger picture trades, but just roster upgrades to give you a better chance this season. You also wrote about potentially the Nets being involved in, a sort of, I guess, fire sale of sorts, for a lack of better words.
Too good to tank, man. Like, they're too good to tank.
Yeah. Do you think that's something that might materialize, I guess, from Brooklyn's perspective, and if Philly will be kind of knocking on the door anywhere else to see if there's anywhere to upgrade?
Yeah, I mean, that is the sense around the league, is that, for these contending teams or competitive teams, that there's a little bit of a kind of, one-stop shopping in Brooklyn, just a bunch of guys that aren't seen, by rival teams as part of the Nets' future. Now, the Cam Thomas situation, I think it's fair to highlight, like, not only didn't get an extension done, but, my understanding was that kind of, possibility was, extinguished pretty quick in the process, that wasn't something they were looking to do. I think that's somewhat telling. Talented player, scoring the heck out of it, but, certainly not a guy who moves the ball. Like, he's a gunner. So, Cam Johnson, you go down the list, like,
they've got a lot of really good
Dennis
guys.
Schroeder, man. Dorian Finney-Smith. Yeah, there's a lot. Right?
Bojan Bogdanovic hasn't even played, but that's another dude that, if you get him back out there. Yeah. Now, in fairness to the Nets and GM Sean Marks, the indications on that side are that, that it's not going to be the fire sale that some people might think it's going to be. We'll see. You win a few games. You got Jordy Fernandez trying to make his way as a coach. And these, I'm just being honest, these are the stories and the parts of the job that are tricky this time of year because everybody's got competing agendas. Jordy wants good players because he's trying to do his thing as a coach. Sean, as they continue to kind of dig out of the James Harden, Durant, Kyrie Irving hole is trying to figure out what the future looks like. So the last line of that column said, that Sean is going to have a lot of possibilities to sort through at the deadline. I think that is a very fair and safe statement.
Yeah, they've been a team that has played every good team really tough. So, I mean, frankly, just personally, I hope they don't necessarily blow it up because I like a good team full of role players who overperform. And I think Jordy Fernandez, pretty good young coach. And so I'd like to see him get a chance. Sam Amick, go and read him at The Athletic. Thank you very much. He gives us all the inside info, and that's why we know what the heck's going on behind the scenes. Coming up after the break, S and I are going to answer some listener questions again. It's time for what I think is going to become my favorite part of the show. Listener questions. We got a bunch of questions responded on Twitter to our call for questions the other day. So we decided we'd pick a couple more.
Shout out to y'all.
A basketball question and a non-basketball question because, we're trying to have some fun around here. So we got a question from Peace Key at Peace Key over on Twitter. And this feels like a question really kind of built for you, S, because it's a Raptors question. So what is Jakob Poeltl's trade value? I have a feeling you're going to have an inflated sense of what his trade value is, but I'm curious to see.
I actually don't think so.
Three first-round picks? Is that where you're starting?
Come on. No. So I actually, first of all, great question. Second, I think his value to what the Toronto Raptors need him for is way more than what he would get on the open market right now. I think what they would look for is probably like 1 pick or 2 picks and, potentially a prospect to be able to supplement losing their starting big man. I don't think that's necessarily out there for them. Because
What's he making this season?
It's like 19 million.
Okay. That's doable money for a lot of teams, like contenders that might need a backup big.
Totally. Yeah.
But would there be even any teams that you could think of that would be kicking the tires on Jakob Poeltl?
Any team that I would think of is like, okay, so the New Orleans Pelicans need a center, but they're also decimated by injuries. And what's the point of them going out and trying to get a starting center? The Lakers have wanted a center, another big man to add. Yeah. Maybe that ends up being something they end up doing or pursuing. But I still think it's tough from the Raptors' perspective to say, hey, we gave up a pick. We gave up a couple of second-round picks a couple of years ago to bring this guy in.
Sunk cost fallacy, man. You got to let that stuff go. I think that, look, if you can get a first-round pick for Jakob Poeltl and you're the Toronto Raptors, you definitely should do that. You should take that bite at the apple. You are doing nothing with him. You're wasting a year of his career. You're not competing unless he just really loves it there.
Yeah, he might. The issue with Toronto is like they don't have anybody else who can even try to replicate what he does. Like if there was just another young big man on the team that could have the opportunity, then absolutely that makes sense to try and pursue a trade. But like there's no one there. And there's no one in the 2025 draft. There's no big man in the 2025 draft that's like, oh, this is the guy they need to go out for.
You're telling me the Toronto Raptors are building around Jakob Poeltl for the foreseeable future? That feels like a failure, an organizational failure. But I would say, look, if they got a first round pick and a young prospect, they probably are going to make that trade. I mean, definitely.
If the Pelicans want to give, Yves Missi, they might. Yeah,
I don't think so. Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought. Just go ahead and forget that one. Okay, here's the second question, and again, this is a little out of my wheelhouse here. What is the best chocolate bar? Now, I think that super producer Andrew Schlecht chose that question because he expected me to have some kind of crazy answer.
Do you have a crazy answer?
No, but I would say this. My answer is, I lived in Europe. It's going to be a German chocolate. It's Ritter's Sport. And one of the reasons that I like it is because it actually has a lot of different flavors. So like there's like a coffee cappuccino type flavor, some that has fruit. I mean, it's, there's a caramel one.
There's variety. Yeah.
There's something for every occasion. I'm not a big chocolate guy though. And I'll tell you, like, I've been confused by so many things. Like I lived in Asia for a little bit, confused by so many things that I thought was chocolate that wound up not being chocolate that I might have been scarred a little bit by that.
It's like when someone gives you a phone and you're like, oh, this is actually a cake.
It's a cake. Yeah. It was like, no, these are beans. Oh, okay. Right. But no, Ritter Sport, it was great to take like on hikes and stuff. And I got, much better chocolate in Europe, obviously.
Okay.
But, So what about you? What's your favorite chocolate bar?
You mentioned like a coffee flavored. Canada is great for one specific coffee flavored chocolate bar. I used to love getting this at Halloween. It would get you all pumped up and like energetic and whatnot. Called Coffee Crisp. It's
Coffee
awesome.
Crisp. Was it crunchy?
Yes, it was crunchy.
Okay.
Yeah. It has like it's kind of like a wafer with a little chocolate around it type of thing, but it's good. Coffee.
Interesting. What's the wafer? Is it like a vanilla wafer? Is it like a graham cracker?
I have no idea, to be honest.
We're going to find this out. Let us know if we're wrong. I mean, obviously I'm wrong here, but let us know in the comments what your favorite chocolate bar is, and we'll we'll argue about
Ritter
it amongst
Sport
ourselves.
or Coffee Chris.
I mean, mine is way better, obviously. That's going to do it for today's show, folks. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to send us your emails over at nbadaily@theathletic.com.
Yes, sir.
Shout out to The Bounce. Zach Harper writes the best newsletter on the internet, so go and subscribe to that. For Es Baraheni, I'm Dave DuFour, and this has been the NBA Daily. Thanks for waking up with us.